All right, so here's kind of like the skinny on cellular respiration. So as far as like, we're going to do it just like photosynthesis, it's like the basic stuff. And then how does it occur? We're actually going to do like a little flow chart kind of deal. And then we're going to put it on here. Okay? You can? Yeah, I'm just going to write it up here in the easier for me. All right, so what is it? It's a conversion of glucose into a usable form, which is ATP. Actually, just put that. Okay, now notice I didn't say anything about oxygen because there's two types. So that's the next question is, there are two types. So what are the two types that they said? Okay, so anaerobic and aerobic, so, or vice versa. Anaerobic. Now, let's see. Anaerobic is also called fermentation.
Let's say 18.
Yeah, here. I got lost in the letters. So fermentation. So has anybody taken foods class? Have y'all talked about fermentation at all? Or did y'all?
Yeah, we did.
I did not really.
Did you talk about fermentation with yeast? Making bread and that kind of thing? Okay, so that's actually what we're going to do over here in this demo. Because usually this is where people remember it. It's like taking that foods class. We used to have a foods teacher who's still a substitute in our, after she retired, she's now still a substitute, Miss Herring. She's like
Oh,
a
she's
short
so
lady.
cute.
She used to be, in, I can't remember, she might be in Miss Ford's old room, or it might, I don't know, it's one of those rooms. But she would make, like, her foods classes would make homemade yeast rolls, like on Fridays, and you could just smell it through the school. It's so good, and they would sell them. And it was really neat because it was one thing that they would do, where they would make them like in cinnamon rolls and stuff. But when we talk about fermentation, it's not just that; it's also what your muscles do when they're tired. So anyway, all right. So aerobic and anaerobic. Where did they occur? So where? They occur in cells. Okay, so aerobic mitochondria, and that's why it's considered the motor or the energy center. And anaerobic, oxygen is the ticket into the mitochondria. So if you don't have oxygen, you can't get in, so you're stuck in the cytoplasm.
Can I briefly see Omar for 1 second in the hallway, please?
Okay. Okay, so we've got what it is, the two types, where they occur, what do both types start with. So they both begin with, glucose. They have to begin with glucose and the splitting of glucose. So they both begin with glucose being split by a process called glycolysis. Okay, so that's where we have the sugar split. Okay. All right, next. So they both start with glycolysis. Why is it necessary? So why is this whole process necessary? Why respiration? What would you say? So obtain, so if we know the end, what's the end point? Glucose is converted to ATP. So why is ATP important? So why you need energy?
So you can
So all cellular work, it goes back to the ATP cycle. So remember, on one side, we're using the phosphates and doing all this work, and the other side, it gets charged back up because we have an input of glucose, and it's constantly doing this. So even photosynthesis makes ATP. We find out it makes itself creates some of its own ATP. So it's interesting that the whole why behind it, whether you have oxygen or not, there are some organisms that hate oxygen. They die in the presence of oxygen. So obviously, are they going to be aerobic or anaerobic? Anaerobic. The first living things on this planet were anaerobic. So why is because glucose can't be utilized in cells to do work, maintain homeostasis, everything we need to do. It must be converted to ATP. Converted. All right, let me get out of the way. All right. So that's the why. When does this happen? So when do cells make ATP? Just during the day? At night? Okay. So when? 24/7 till death, or at least death of that cell. So that individual, whether they have a mitochondria or not, so we're talking about bacteria all the way up to the most complex animals, all of them have to make ATP from glucose. And they're going to do it until they die. So let's say that you are fasting and you just stop eating. Can you still make ATP? Why?
You can obtain it in a glucose.
Can you obtain glucose?
Because isn't it from like your fat storage?
Yeah.
Like all the you start fat.
So fat can be converted to a molecule that actually can be utilized and put into respiration. Protein can eventually be kind of broken down if it has to be. But yeah, you've got glycogen. Remember, that's a complex like animal starch, so it's in your liver and your muscles, so you can use that too. So you're okay. You just need some water. But other than that, you're good to go. All right. So how does this happen? I'm gonna do like a little flow chart, and then we'll go to the back. Okay. So let's start with, so glucose comes in like this. So glucose comes in from the bloodstream. We'll look more at the details. This is really just like an overview so we can look at the details on the back. But glucose comes in and actually has to be broken down. Oh, not, sorry, that's not right. Why? Glycolysis. Okay. And glycolysis actually is going to split that sugar into two pyruvate molecules. Okay. So this is what starts both. So when I say begins both, what does that mean? Begins both what? Yeah, both types of reactions. So begins both either anaerobic or aerobic. And you'll see that's what we're going to put out here. So this is where it starts, and this is the cytoplasm. Okay, so the glucose finds its way into the cytoplasm probably through diffusion or facilitated diffusion.
What's that say after?
So 2-pyruvate, that's an R. So pyruvate or pyruvic acid, you'll see that. We find that everything is not just clear cut, like a recipe. In all biochemical pathways, all this is catalyzed with enzymes. Enzymes are working at every single stage. This process itself has 10 different reactions before you even get to this. So it's like a cascade reaction. So this one has to happen, then this one happens, and this one happens, and eventually we get what we need. But it's very complex in there, and all it is there's a transfer of electrons and breaking down of this. And so long story short, if you know this part, then you'll be able to learn the other stuff later. So the glycolysis, now we've got this. Now we've got two options. What if we have oxygen that's also diffusing into the cell? Is it going to go anaerobic or aerobic? Aerobic. So that we're kind of at an impasse here. If there's oxygen inside the cell, it's going to keep on trucking to aerobic, go to the mitochondria. But if there's not, then it's going to stay in the cytoplasm and just be able to not make a whole lot of ATP. So if there's oxygen, stop it. What are you doing?
Yeah, I want you to do that.
You don't like that pen? Maybe you don't like
I want
me?
us to take notes.
Oh. If oxygen is present, okay, it's going to, those molecules are going to head to the mitochondria for aerobic respiration. Okay, so this is the equation that we say is opposite photosynthesis. Okay, so we're going to write it out. So we said there's one glucose, which has to be converted to pyruvic acid. Okay, so oxygen's in, and what is it going to make? What are its waste products, first of all? What are you releasing?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. What else are you releasing in your breath?
Nitrogen. Oh.
Water. Water. Okay. Humid. Okay. And then ATP. Right? So for this one, the glucose plus the oxygen, 6 of them, are going to be converted to 6 CO2s plus 6 waters plus up to 38 ATP. Okay? So if we just remove the ATP and we insert light and flip it around, we've got photosynthesis. So that's what you're doing right now. Everybody in here, all of your cells are doing that.
Is it 6?
It should be 6 oxygen. Yep. Okay. So that's not anything different than what you've heard. This is where it might be a little different. So let's say that you're working out to the point where you're breathing hard. You're really trying to help your oxygen deficit when you're working out, or maybe you're not even working out and you're just like having to zip across the campus and you're out of breath. Your lungs are trying to give your body and supply your cells with as much oxygen at any given point. But let's say that you're moving your muscles and they start to burn. And everybody's felt the burn, right? So the burn is you've gone anaerobic. So there's not enough oxygen. Right.
So you know the workout is good.
So if no O2 is available, then that pyruvic acid is going to stay in the cytoplasm for anaerobic respiration.
I don't like this.
You don't like that?
Did you mean sliding?
Yeah, I think I tried to write an M and it just didn't want to let me. So there are lots of different types of fermentation or anaerobic respiration, but the type that you do is lactic acid. Okay, and that is literally the burn you feel as an acid that builds up in your muscles. So the different options all depend on the type of cells that are doing it or the organism that's doing it. So we're going to put, there are different types depending. Okay, I want right here on the type of organism or cell. And or cells involved. So this is where we're going to pause in just a second. We're going to set up one type of this, and that's going to be alcoholic fermentation. Okay. It's all baker's yeast. Okay, can I move it down? I'm just going to write alcoholic fermentation. Do we have enough room? Or maybe? It can go on the bottom or the back. I mean, if there's room, if you're writing on there, you can. There's plenty of room at the bottom. Okay, so if yeast is involved, and this is where we are. After I write this down, I'm gonna show you this demo, and then we're gonna stop the notes, just kind of have a mental break. We're gonna do a board game real quick, then we'll come back and finish it. Okay, and then by that time, I think that would have already worked. So the yeast, if it's yeast involved, okay. So y'all know what yeast are, right? What do you know about yeast? All right, one person tell me what you know about yeast.
It grows in moist conditions.
Grows in moist conditions? Yes, it does.
I was watching a video online one time. I just thought it was interesting. It was on yeast infections, and they said that not everyone has yeast. And I was like, wait, everyone has yeast. So that's wrong, right? It was supposedly a doctor.
Maybe not everybody has yeast cultures. They're very natural. Like they actually, most people have yeast.
Not everyone has yeast.
And the reason I said, because yeast is out there in the environment. So you didn't just slather a bunch of yeast on your body when you were born. It naturally actually had to invade your body. I mean, it's just out here. So it's a normal part of your flora. No.
When you told me everyone has yeast, I thought it was like everyone has blood too.
Yeah, no, well, majority of people is very, probably, I don't even know what statistic that is. So we've got that type of yeast. So when someone has a yeast infection, it kind of smells a certain way, okay? Very similar to what this is going to smell like. So this is just the brewer's yeast. This is different species. And then there's different, this is baker's yeast. We have different brewer's yeast that is used to make different types of alcohol. But this baker's yeast is just what's going to cause, become activated when we put it in warm water. So when I keep putting my finger in here, each of these little dots is one little inactive yeast. Okay, it's not active yet until we give it what it wants. We have to give it a moist environment, so we're going to give it warm water. We're going to give it some sugar to eat, and
I saw this in that video. They put it in a cup and it just.
Well, it won't actually activate that quickly. Not over here. But what we're going to try to make it do is actually go anaerobic. And so if we cut off its oxygen supply, we should be able to make it go anaerobic. So yeast always perform alcoholic fermentation or anaerobic respiration. So alcoholic fermentation. And so what they do is, you know how we said glucose comes in, technically it gets converted to this pyruvate. That's actually what goes into the process, but no oxygen. We're going to shut that party down. No oxygen at all. We're going to put a balloon over the mouth of that test tube. And what it's going to make from glucose is it's going to, from this, it's going to make carbon dioxide. and it's going to make ethyl alcohol. So ethyl. And there's different types of alcohols that will be made too. But ethyl alcohol is what can be drunk. Now, this alcohol is going to be made by this baker's yeast too. It's just you don't get drunk on eating bread, because what happens to the alcohol when you bake it just goes away. It evaporates. So
Not what I meant. That's the it's not what I meant. It's gonna evaporate. It's like, a lot of people cook with this.
to add flavor, just to add flavor. So when we put this yeast in there, what makes the bread rise then? If the alcohol is not the alcohol, it's going away.
Isn't it baking?
Right there, you're right. It's carbon dioxide. So when you get a piece of bread, we're making toast yesterday, and you look down, and I saw all these little holes in my bread. So where did the holes come from? Yeah, it's all those bubbles that were popped. They were trapped in the dough. It was baked, and then the CO2 dissipated. So then you've got, that's actually the Calvin cycle. That's part of photosynthesis. Yeah. So anyway, we're gonna set up 3 conditions then. I'm afraid to touch it. Usually it cuts off when it does that. So over here, let's set up 3 different conditions. If anybody wants to help, you can. And then we're gonna get into groups of like 3 people. You can have 4 max. Get a whiteboard and markers, and we're gonna just practice with this stuff, and then we'll come back. Is that your last one? Okay, I'll just. Are you sure? Okay. Okay, so what we're gonna do with this, and we're gonna let it do its thing while you guys are yeah.
I just put my face in
I would say
It's because like.
all right, so let me show you, we have 3 scenarios. The first one is our control, okay? And control is gonna get yeast and water, and that's it. We're gonna heat it up. This one is gonna get experimental, we're gonna put yeast. And we're gonna give it some food.
I'm not even there.
Some regular sugar. And we're gonna just give it some more. And then this one, we'll give them some food. This is so not a controlled experiment, so I'm not better than anything.
I think he's fine.
It's really not controlled. Okay, so what do we need to do to this one to make it make alcohol? Right, so we gotta shut this oxygen in a while.
It's not making it. See, it's fun there on the other side.
Okay, so we'll see what happens.
The balloon inflates. I've done this. I've done this like every year since 5th grade.
Yeah, no, we. Your school actually did check ours did.
Let's see. Where are
We had
So
this.
y'all put up the chat.
What's your group speaking?
And so did
It was when they forget though.
we update the Facebook to the basketball team.
It's on YouTube, you know?
It's not broadcasting. Oh, stop broadcast.
Y'all have three.
Nice.
Okay, so the first question, and we're going to do the same way how you just switch the board around. So the first one's a drawing question. Yes. So give it to the best drawer, the quickest drawer. Okay, so you're going to draw a cross section of a leaf. Okay, a cross section of a leaf, and you have to include the cuticle, the epidermis, the mesophyll, a stoma, and guard cells. So there's 5 things. I'll repeat them, but you have to label those on your diagram. So we have a waxy cuticle, epidermis, mesophyll, stoma, and guard cells. And then label, you can abbreviate, but just label each one. Cuticle, epidermis, mesophyll, stoma, and guard cells.
You know this?
Yep. You can abbreviate.
Then why is it this way?
All right, so 10 seconds, then you're just going to show us what you have. All right. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Burn. Time's up.
I'm so confused.
Okay. So let me see. Let's see what you got. All right, hold it up. Like, yeah, Noah, you can't keep drawing, dude. Okay. So, stoma. I got that. And then you have what's the top part? All right, epidermis. So epidermis, cuticle, 2 points. You guys have stoma and epidermis and waxy cuticle, right? So 3. And then you guys have mesophyll. All right, so 1. Mesophyll. Oh, no. Stoma. You know which one? It's kind of like, what is it pointing to? Which one is it pointing to? Yes, that's right. 2 points. Y'all? Stoma, cuticle, and what's the mesophyll? Yes, you got 3, right? And then you guys have stoma.
And then we have part of the mesophyll.
The
word at least.
Part of what? Oh, wait, where? Oh, I see it. Yeah, so 2. Okay, next. Pass the marker. So which tissue actually moves the water and minerals from the roots to the tippy top of the tree?
Wait.
Which tissue, what type of cells move water from the roots to the top of the tree? And we said it's inside of a vein. Yep, what type of tissue carries water?
Can we just draw it?
You have to have the name. All right, flash your boards if you got it. All right. All right, answer was, or did y'all have it?
No, wait, 2 more seconds. 5 more seconds. Wait, we got it.
All right, 2 points. The answer was xylem. Yeah, point. Okay, next. Okay, so what tissue actually moves the sugars? What vascular tissue moves sugar? 2 point. All right, point. Phloem. Right. Okay, next is what part of the leaf is where most photosynthesis takes place? What part of the leaf?
You can't just put the top.
I can't see. Right. So 2. What does that say? What's that say?
I'm sorry.
Point. Our answer was mesophyll. Okay, next one is what cells control the opening and closing of the stoma? What cells control the opening and closing of the stoma? Oh, you just have to use a whole mess. 2. All right, 5, 4, 2, 1. Answer was, what was it, y'all? Guard cells. Okay, next one is let's see. How about what pigment is a backup pigment that is typically orange? 2. Point. That's not how you spell it. Point. Oh, they. Just 10 minutes. You're out of home. Carolina? Point. Yeah, point. It's 10 minutes at lunch if you don't have any hall passes left.
I don't have, no, I have like
I'll put your name on the board. Okay, next is what if you were measuring the rate of photosynthesis, what gas would you count? 2. All right, next is what colors of light if you shine the whole spectrum. Hey, shh. If you shine all the spectrums of light, all the different colors on a plant, which 2 do they prefer for photosynthesis? Which ones yield a higher rate? 2. Point. 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 All right, red and blue. Okay, so what color is reflected? What color is reflected? 2. Point. let's see. Okay, where does the light reaction take place in a chloroplast? Where does the light reaction take place in a chloroplast? All right. Where in the chloroplast? All right, 2 points. Point. Answer was thylakoid. Yes, it is.
Have you seen any like?
It's right here. Right here.
Okay, so all right, so the chlorophyll is actually in the thylakoid. Okay, so that's why where the chlorophyll comes in. Okay, so what is the purpose of chlorophyll? What is the purpose of chlorophyll for photosynthesis? Yep, 2.
Oh, yeah.
Point.
It's each.
Point. Yep. All right. Next is let's see. What is the major product of the light reaction?
What?
Product of the light reaction.
I don't think that's it. No.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 2. I couldn't tell who was first. Point. You've already put an answer.
Oh, you can't go on class until tell me.
Oh, there's only one answer. So which one is it? Okay, so so glucose is a product of the dark reaction, but where does the carbon come from? Where does the carbon come from that is in the glucose?
Where does it come from?
Mm-hmm. So where does the carbon come from that goes into that? 2. All right, specifically. Point.
Oh, you felt right. That is
Point.
a great question. I felt like
All right, so let's see. So how about what are the reactants of aerobic respiration? What are the reactants of aerobic respiration? Aerobic. Reactants. You can't change your answers once you've messed. All right, so it was glucose and oxygen. Reactants is what goes into it, glucose and oxygen.
What's the next question?
All right, so the next question is, what are the 3 major products of aerobic respiration? Right. So 3. All right, be specific about the energy. Right. What was the first one?
water.
Right.
How many?
So products 2. So products are. Where's the glucose? What is the glucose? No. What are the products? Okay, and then there's one more, 2. So I'll give you 1 point. The other one is carbon dioxide. You just put it over with the glucose. Okay, so yes, 2. All right, next is the site of aerobic respiration and eukaryotic cells.
What?
A site, yeah. Aerobic point. Aerobic. Points.
Is it right?
All right, next one, point. Next one is what process do both types of respiration start with? 2 points.
That's not how you spell it, but.
Is it right?
Point. Yeah, which one is it? Point. All right, so the answer is the process, not the molecule. So the process is glycolysis. Right. Okay, so why, in order to produce alcohol with the experiment over there, what did you have to do for it to actually go anaerobic?
No, yes, no.
2. Point. Good.
What's yours?
Point. Good.
Blackout.
Lockout oxy.
You can't do it again. You already had it. Point. Okay, so now is what gas is going to be trapped in the balloon?
What gas is it?
What gas is right? 2, 2, 2. Point. What gas is going to the balloon? Okay, next is this is the last one.
I don't know what.
Where, let's see, when do your muscle cells go anaerobic, or in what kind of conditions do your muscle cells go anaerobic?
What English is that?
2.
You choked in my gum.
Oh, okay. After you get done running.
You can't do this to us.
Miss Thornhill, over here.
Point. There's something else you need to add to that. You're right. You're on the right track. You just have to add something to it. Oh yeah. Point.
What?
No,
Come
no.
on.
No.
And feel the burn, right? So yeah. I mean, you were so doggone close. Point. Okay. So leave your boards where they are. And did you keep track of your points?
Yeah.
Okay, so put your names on your board, so you'll just claim your board. We'll we won't erase them before Monday, so just like put your name on it and put the points on there, and then come back real quick so you can get back into your groups for your video.
I'm going to talk to you.
Yeah, look at me.
I was ready for you to put that I in one.
Just keep talking about this.
Like, I gave it to you with your nose. I got it. Take it.
Anybody know how many?
Okay, so we're going to zip through this very quickly. That way you guys can have at least hopefully about 20, 25 minutes with your group. We'll talk about these videos, okay? All right. this will work. I don't even know if this is gonna work.
Did you find it?
I think I found the poor side. What are you looking for?
Patricia, you're looking for something?
I think this might have worse.
Just our pencil.
Somebody pick up Patricia's pencil.
It's there. It's not skin.
Did you take it?
It can be skin. Wait till you see her.
It's gone.
Like,
Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of map this out. So when you see the word cellular respiration, usually they're talking about aerobic. Okay, just kind of throw it out there. If they say cellular respiration and photosynthesis are opposites because oxygen is involved with both. So typically that's true. So we're going to pretend this is one of your muscle cells. We've taken all the other stuff out of it except the cytoplasm and one mitochondria. Okay, and we've just kind of blown it up. So here's the bloodstream coming from the heart and the lungs. And at any given time, all of your cells will have some type of direct contact with like some little tiny capillaries, and so they're going to have a blood supply that's going to service them. Okay, so here it is coming in this way. So let's draw like a little red blood cell. So what are the red blood cells going to carry to the cells? All right, so it has hemoglobin inside that attaches to what gas? Oxygen. So since we're coming from the heart and the lungs, it's going to supply the cell with some oxygen. So oxygen is going to diffuse into that cell. So red blood cell, and that's what its job is. Okay, so that would make us aerobic. And then that would be a ticket into the mitochondria. Okay, so we also have the blood supply is going to be bringing in our nutrients, and in this case it's glucose, and it's probably moving in by facilitated diffusion. It's a little bit bigger than oxygen, so it takes a little bit longer to get in there. So the glucose is going to come into the cytoplasm, into the first process, which is glycolysis. So this is the first step of either one of those. Okay, so glycolysis is going to do what to that glucose? Break it down into two parts. So glycolysis plus 2 ATP, because it takes energy to actually make energy, like it takes money to make money. So you need 2 ATPs that will go to actually split that sugar into 2 parts. And that's the 2-pyruvate plus 4 ATP gross. Okay. So it doesn't mean that they're nasty, but on a paycheck, you have gross pay and you have net pay. So what is your like total pay you make per hour? Is that gross or net? Gross. So then you look at your paycheck and you're like, hey, I did pretty well. And then you look at the net pay and you're like, oh gosh, that, I don't take home hardly anything. After they take out taxes and Social Security and all that other business that I have to, we all have to pay for. So yeah.
You feel like slightly bigger. It's not even fair.
You want to go like this? Is that good? Okay. I know. So because it makes 4 gross, but it took 2 to do the process, how many do you really get out of it? 2. So when I write 2, I'm going to put in parentheses 2 ATP net. That's what I mean. Is it takes 2 to get it going, but we made 4, so we get 2 out of it. So that's it. For if we go into anaerobic, that's all the ATP you get, which isn't a lot from one glucose. So as long as we have oxygen coming in, this stuff is going to come in here, and it can actually go through the process. So we have glucose now in this form coming in. We have oxygen coming in. What are the products? So what did you guys just list off? 3 products. What are the 2 waste products?
CO2,
okay,
H2O, and ATP.
And ATP. Okay, so that's what we're going to show shooting out the side. Now, there are several chemical reactions that take place. There's one called the citric acid cycle. That's what this is. Okay, you don't have to know the ins and outs of it at all. Just be able to recognize that that's part of aerobic respiration. There's also something called the electron transport chain. That's where most of the ATP is going to come from. And again, as long as you know that that's part of this, you're in good shape. So out of it, we're going to draw another little blood vessel that's going to go back to the heart, to the lungs. We're going to say that one's headed back. Okay, and we've got red blood cell here that's going to pick up some CO2. So we've got CO2, water, and you don't have to write yours here. If you have more room out there, feel free. And then all this is going to be how many ATP now? So we made 2 by glycolysis. How many? 8. There's 38 possible.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yep. So we should end up getting 36, right? Because we made 2 out of 38. So this is 36 ATP. So that's awesome, because from 1 glucose, we can get that number of ATP for the cell to do its job. But this is what everybody's doing right now. And all your cells, you're doing this. But we're going to go anaerobic. And when you make your muscles go anaerobic, we'll end up doing it on Monday, because I want you to have time to meet with your group. But in order to do that, you never go into the mitochondria because there's not any oxygen. So if we come back here, if there's no oxygen available, then this pyruvate actually goes anaerobic. And this is called lactic acid fermentation. You're not going to make alcohol. Otherwise, when you're working out, you would get drunk.
That would be so much fun. I feel like I might actually like working out.
He's like, why are you always at the Y?
I'll be like,
So I'm going to put 2 pyruvate.
funny.
And then those muscle cells are going to make lactic acid, and that's what literally makes your muscles burn. It's anytime they get fatigued. So if there is an oxygen deficit and fatigue or strenuous exercise, you have lactic acid, but you're still breathing out CO2 as a waste product. But that's the burn you feel. So when your coaches are saying you need to go anaerobic.
Please dismiss the JV and varsity baseball players at this time. Thank you.
They got dismissed early.
Well, the home game is not moving yet.
Right, they have to travel. So when your coaches are making your muscles go anaerobic, it helps with endurance, it helps with strength. It helps you this is when you're maxing out, when you're lifting. For swimming, we do a lot of sprint sets because it allows them to make their muscles go anaerobic. You have to have an anaerobic set, then you have a recovery set. So it's just like if you run, you do sprints, but then your coaches are going to say you need to swim down, you need to walk it down, you need to stretch. And that's because we're trying to get that lactic acid out of your muscles and back into this, because we can take this and it can go back and be converted into ATP once you're not at an oxygen deficit. Okay. There used to be, I was taught that's what made your muscles really, really sore later. They're finding that that's not true anymore. That at first that might make them a little sore, but that's not why you're sore the next day. So like I was taught. So that's that. And then the only other one y'all have to know is yeast. So there are other organisms that do this. Bacteria do this. And y'all probably all eaten lactic acid. It's in sauerkrauts and yogurts and sour cream. Those are all products of fermentation. So if you like any of that stuff, it's lactic acid. Okay. Video. So you've got lactic acid as a group. We have alcoholic fermentation as a group. We have aerobic respiration, and we have photosynthesis. They're going to be due on Friday next week. Okay, so that gives you a lot more time, even though next week on Friday we'll be talking about DNA. We're going to move on, but you guys are still going to be very valuable projects. So if you were not here to get the assignment sheet, I've got some up here. But you guys need to get with your group, and you can make any type of videos. You can make a stop animation. You can do yeah, it has to be actually. All right, who else needs one? One more. Okay, let me run off another one. Thought I had enough.